The story is kind of hard to put into words. I feel like you had to be there to believe it. It all began in the year 2008 of the housing crisis. To sum that up, so many people took out all these loans and at the end couldn't pay off the mortgages. That caused all these houses to be undervalued. That's where I come in. I was on the lookout for a house to buy. I wanted somewhere in the country setting. I wanted space between my neighbors and I don't mind living next to somebody, but been there, done that. Plus, I had my daughter, River, with me, so I wanted her to try something new. We always lived in the city, so something new sounded really nice. She was only 10, so I figured she was young enough to start off somewhere and still make some friends. I was looking online until I found a house that seemed too good to be true. The house looked like it was worth at least $500,000, but the price was half of that. I clicked on it and read all the details. This was a deal I could not pass up. I was able to talk to a realtor and that same week make it official. It was one of those buy as is type of deals. I figured the price was worth it and whatever problems came up, then we would fix it. We started packing and River said, "Hey Dad, are you sure about this?" I went up to her and got on my knee and said, "Trust me, this is a good thing." I gave her a hug and we continued packing. The house was located in Upper New York. It was a nice area, and mostly important, the houses were not so close to each other. We decided to drive there since we were coming from New Jersey. It was a road trip, which I really enjoyed. I always found these long drives peaceful. We finally arrived and it looked so much better in person. I looked at River smile and that's all the assurance I needed that I was making the right decision. We walked up to the house and the realtor was waiting for us. I needed to sign some papers finalizing the deal. I signed them and just like that, this house was ours. Before I was able to ask the realtor something, they left. I guess they had other deals to finalize. River and I entered our new house, and it looked just as amazing on the inside as the outside. I was in disbelief. How could this house exist? I told River to go upstairs and pick out a room. She ran upstairs at the speed I didn't even know she was capable of. I started to take a look around and made my way to the living room. It had an old rustic feeling, which oddly I liked. It also had a fireplace, which definitely was a plus. I made my way to the kitchen and it was pretty big. When you have a vision of what your dream house is, this was mine. We didn't have that much to pack since we lived in an apartment, so unpacking was pretty quick. The house came semi-furnished, so it did have the typical living room set, table and chairs. I went upstairs to check on Rivers. The upstairs had the same old rustic style as the rest of the house. There was 3 bedrooms upstairs. I figured one of them would be mine, one of them would be hers, and the other one would be a guest room. I found her in one of the rooms and I asked, "How do you like it?" She smiled and said, "It's so big." I was happy to hear that. Like I mentioned before, we lived in an apartment, so having a space this big was a great change. I told her I was going to start cooking something, and then I left her to it. I felt like a proud parent as I was walking down the steps. There was only one thing wrong with this place, and it's nothing major. It was pretty dusty and the floors were a bit dirty, but that was something we could work on tomorrow. I went to the kitchen wondering what the first meal in our home would be. I wasn't the best cook, but I made do. I decided to go basic, spaghetti and meatballs. It was a classic and pretty hard to mess up. It was a quick meal to make. We started eating and River was looking around. I asked, "What are you looking at?" She pointed up and said, "We have high ceilings." I laughed and so did she. It was nice. After we ate, she seemed a bit tired, which I didn't blame her. It was a long car ride. I told her to get ready for bed. She went upstairs to brush her teeth while I cleaned up. Before I went upstairs, I went out to the front. I took a deep breath and smiled. The front was pretty much a dirt path leading up to the house. I had plans for this house, and in all my thinking, I thought, we did it. I went back inside. I locked the door and checked the back door too. I went upstairs to tuck in River, but she was already asleep. I went to her, put the blanket over her, tucking her in. What a great first day. Today I had to get back to work. Fortunately for me, I was a writer. That means I could work from home and not miss anything important at home. I woke up bright and early. I went for a quick jog, and by the time I came back, River was already awake in the kitchen. I walked up to her and asked, "You ready to eat something?" She smiled and shook her head yes. I made her favorite, chocolate pancakes. This was our breakfast ritual. I know it's not healthy, but it's hard for me to say no. We finished our breakfast and I told her she could decorate her room the way she wanted to while I was working. I sat in the dining room on my laptop. I was drawing a blank. To put it simple, my whole thing was writing scary stories. I usually try to base them on real life too. I would do research on something based on real life and put a twist on it. I found writing relaxing. I started to do some research online when I heard River call me. I heard her running down the steps. She ran up to me with something in her hands. She asked, "What's this?" I looked at it and I didn't recognize it at first. It was a board game. It looked so familiar. I said, "I'm not really sure what it is." She asked me if she could keep it and I didn't see the harm of letting her do so. As I was writing, the board game's name popped into my head. It felt so familiar, so I typed it in the search bar. Ouija. I found out what it was used for, contacting the dead. My first thought was, who in their right mind would contact the dead? So I looked up who created it. His name was Elijah Bond, and he called it a Ouija board. He started selling it in 1890 until he sold the rights to it in 1901. It was pretty interesting to see how it all came about. I went back to the search bar and searched up Ouija stories just to see what was out there. I figured people would have different experiences with this, and I was right. I was scrolling down the links on the page until one of them caught my eye. It was a video, and it was titled, "Please do not watch." The description said that watching this will change your life, so I clicked on it, of course, and what I seen changed my perspective on what it was. It was a guy with a camera pointed to his face. He looked like he hasn't gone to sleep in about a week. He said, "I don't know how long I've been awake, but damn, I'm so tired. I don't even know what day it is anymore. I'm afraid to leave my room. I feel like it's my only safe place here. Why can't it leave me alone? I should have never played with that stupid Ouija board." He started to have those heavy blinks you get before falling asleep. I don't know why, but I wanted him to stay up. All of a sudden, this woman's voice was heard behind the closed door. He said, "Mom?" He stood up from the chair and started walking towards the door. The woman behind the door was talking, but it was hard to make out. He opened the door and there was no one there. I heard a faint growl. He tried to close the door, but it was too late. This invisible thing dragged him out of the room screaming. Suddenly, this man appeared in the doorway. He was wearing this black robe with this massive hood on. He walks towards the screen with only the bottom half of his face showing. He said, "This curse is yours now." My laptop turned off and I felt someone pushing me. It was River. She said that she was hungry and I thought, already? I looked at the time and it was already 8 at night. I stood up and went to the front door. It was dark outside. How did I lose that much time? I went up to her and apologized. I cooked up something real quick. While we were eating, I could only think of the time that I lost. What happened to me? It was getting late, so I told her to get ready for bed while I cleaned up. It didn't take me long, and soon enough I headed upstairs. I felt exhausted, but I wanted to check in on her before I went to bed. I knocked on her door and opened it. She was sitting on her bed playing with her toys. I noticed something at the end of her bed, the Ouija board. I asked her why did she have it out, but she just shrugged her shoulders. I sat down on her bed and said, "I'm sorry about earlier. I guess I just got lost in my work." She put down her toys and said, "What's a curse? I was trying to get your attention and you didn't listen." I didn't know what to say, so I said, "It's basically like scary stories." I tucked her in and before heading out, I took the Ouija board. I said goodnight and I left. I made my way to my room and threw it in the closet. I laid down and fell asleep within a few minutes. Usually I don't remember my dreams, but this is something I would never forget. I sat in my bed and there was a ringing sound. It was hard to see. I had to keep blinking until my vision became clear. The ringing sound stopped and there was quiet. I couldn't hear a single sound. I tried to speak, and I couldn't hear my own voice. I got out of my bed and I looked around. Everything was different. I went to River's room and nothing was there. No bed, no toys, and nothing in her closet. I tried to calm down. I ran downstairs and everything was furnished. It felt like I was in someone else's house. I went to the dining room and saw a laptop on the table, but it wasn't mine. Something drew me to it. I walked up to it and looked at the screen. There was a folder that said "click me," so I did. I saw an article about a home invasion. It involved the father and his daughter, but the daughter did not make it. Suddenly a hand closed the laptop. It gripped me up. It was someone in a black robe with a hood on. He said, "It's your curse now." He stabbed me and then I woke up. I ran to River's room. I was afraid to open it up. I cracked open the door slowly. I looked inside and it was the same before I fell asleep. A rush of relief came over me. I was able to breathe again. I went to her and kissed her on her forehead. I sat down on the floor on the side of her bed. All I could think about is this dream I just had. I didn't want to leave her side and end up falling asleep on the floor. This time I didn't have a dream. It was like a blink of an eye and I woke up. I stood up and River wasn't in her bed. The Ouija board was in her place. I panicked until I heard the water running in the bathroom. I took the Ouija board and threw it in my room. I went to the bathroom to knock on the door, but before I could, I heard her humming a song. I took a deep breath. I went downstairs to start on breakfast. I made eggs, bacon, and some toast. I heard her little feet as she ran down the steps. I put the food on the table. She walked into the living room and asked, "Why were you sleeping on the floor last night?" I said the first thing that came into my head. "I just had a nightmare, that's all." She saw the food on the table and it was like me sleeping on the floor was the last thing on her mind. I sat down and started to eat as well. I tried to forget the dream, but in the back of my mind, it was still there. There was no way I was going to be focused on work. I looked at River and asked, "How about today we have a movie marathon? Whatever you want to watch." She threw up her hands and said movie day. She picked up every animation movie you could think to watch. And just like that, the movie day started. She picked the movie Surf's Up, which was about a surfing penguin. She started the movie while I started the popcorn. It was a fun day. After watching 5 movies, it was already nighttime. I looked down and she was already knocked out. All of a sudden there was a knock on the door. I was confused on who would be here around this time. I carefully laid her head down and headed towards the door. I looked through the peephole and nothing. I started to walk away and there was a knock at the door again. I looked through the peephole again and nothing. I opened the door and stepped outside. I looked around and didn't see anything. I turned around and looked inside of my house. That's when my heart stopped. There was a person with a black robe and an oversized hood looking down at River. I froze for a second but charged towards them. The door slammed in my face before I could make it. I tried to open the door but it was locked. I ran towards the window near the door and saw this person taking her away. I punched the window but couldn't break it. I ran to the front of the house and found this big stone. I threw it at the window, breaking it, and I jumped through. I was attacked as soon as I jumped through the window. I felt a sharp pain on my side. I looked down and it was a knife. The person in the robe put their hand around my neck and said, "It's your curse now." He let go of me as I fell to the floor. I passed out from the blood loss. That was the last time I saw my daughter. I was able to call the police, but there was no evidence to back up my story. This is why I tell my story to you. Anyone who can listen. Anyone who knows the pain of losing someone. Please help me.